Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video, we've got another news and review here to discuss. In today's video, we've got a couple of signings to talk about, a long list of injury updates, training camp cuts, and waiver updates. We do have a couple of other pieces of news, plus some trade rumors involving the Islanders, Flames, Bruins, and Marc Andre Fleury. With all the updates regarding all of these players coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to the video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Now before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. And don't forget to stay tuned for more videos coming out in the very near future. So in today's video, another newsroom review here to discuss as per usual. We'll start off with a couple of signings from our past couple of days. They were both contract extensions. There were two of them. So first, with the St. Louis Blues, 33-year-old left shot defenseman Cam Fowler, who was acquired last year in season by the St. Louis Blues, had a phenomenal finish to the year in the St. Louis Blues organization. On top of that, led the team in points in the postseason. So Fowler had fit in really good with the St. Louis Blues. He's entering final year of his deal. In my offseason preview video, I did mention that the Blues should try and sign Fowler to an extension this offseason. Up until this point, they had not signed to an extension, but now they have. Cam Fowler, who's in the final year of his deal, gets a 3-year contract extension in St. Louis with an AAV of $6.1 million. This is not a bad deal. Fowler's current contract is full cap hit, including the money retained from Anaheim, with a $6.5 million cap hit, so it's actually a little bit of a downgrade on the AAV. Not too bad there. It's only for a 3-year term, so given the fact Fowler's 33, if he puts up similar numbers over the next couple of years, I don't think that's going to be a bad of a contract. In Anaheim, he had 4 assists in 17 games last year, but then he had 9 goals and 36 points in 51 games with St. Louis, including, I think, 10 points in 7 playoff games. So, I mean, he had fit in phenomenally as a top 4 left shot defenseman going forward. I think this is going to be a really solid signing there for the St. Louis Blues. And like I said, if he can put up similar numbers over the next couple of years, even if the last year or two isn't overly great, I think this will be a really solid contract there for the St. Louis Blues. Not a bad signing here, but Cam Fowler has been extended by the St. Louis Blues. And another extension landed in the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. 31-year-old goaltender Anthony Stolarz, who was entering the final year of his deal, had a phenomenal first year in the Toronto Maple Leafs organization, was able to battle with Joseph Woll, earn himself the starting role, and was a starter in the postseason until he got knocked out due to injury reasons by Sam Bennett in the postseason. Has been extended. The Maple Leafs have extended Anthony Stolarz on a 4-year contract extension, AAV of $3.75 million. This is not a bad piece of work here from the Maple Leafs. A lot of people thought that Stolarz was going to get an extension in the $4 to $4.5 million, maybe even $5 million AAV range. So to get him under $4 million is an absolute steal. Stolarz over the past couple of years has really started coming to his own last year, playing 34 games with the Maple Leafs, having a 2.14 GAA, 926 save percentage, and looked pretty good in the first round, the first 2 games for the Toronto Maple Leafs against Florida. So all in all, really solid stuff there from Stolarz. To keep him under $4 million AAV is not half bad, and even if the last year or two is not overly good of a contract, I think for the foreseeable future this is going to be a steal of a deal for the Toronto Maple Leafs. So very interesting note there. But very interesting extensions happened over the past couple of days as Cam Fowler sent a 3-year extension to remain in St. Louis. Stolarz a 4-year extension to remain in Toronto. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to some injury updates, waiver updates, and training camp cuts. So when it comes to some injury updates, we've got a handful of players here to talk about. So first, in the Devils organization, Mark McLaughlin will be out for a while with an undisclosed injury. McLaughlin was a fringe NHL player, potentially a guy who was going to be sent to the AHL and be a call-up option. So to see him be out for the foreseeable future with an undisclosed injury is not overly good there for the New Jersey Devils. Kakko is out 6 weeks with a broken hand. That is not good news there for Seattle Kraken. Kakko is a major piece of that Seattle Kraken forward group, so to see him be out for most likely until mid-November is a bad blow there for the Seattle Kraken. So hopefully Kakko doesn't take too long to return. Max Domi returned to game action in a preseason game after missing a week with a lower body injury, so it's good to see that Domi was able to get back into preseason action, and it seems like he should be ready to start the season, so good stuff there for Domi. Kirill Kaprizov is out day-to-day with an eye injury. Doesn't seem like it's an overly severe injury, but Kaprizov is at least going to be out for the next couple of days with an an eye injury. JJ Peterka and Olli Mata are both out day-to-day with minor injuries. Doesn't seem like there's going to be overly long injuries, and they probably should be ready to start the season, but still bad news there that Peterka and Mata are missing at least some training camp time with injuries. Janssen Harkins in the Anaheim Ducks organization will be out the next 8 weeks with upper body injuries, so that's going to put him out until late November, early December. Harkins is a fringe NHL player, sort of like McLaughlin, so it's not a bad blow for the Ducks, but it's a call-up option that they just lost. Stefan Noesen is going to be out the rest of the preseason and potentially the start of the season, depending on how severe his injury is, with a groin injury, so it's a bad blow there for the Devils. Nosen's a really solid middle six forward, so hopefully he won't be out for an overly long period of time. John Klingberg in San Jose and Sam Girard in Colorado both returned to practice in non-contact roles. Girard missed the start of the preseason with an injury. Klingberg's out day-to-day right now. Both are pretty solid second, third pair defensemen, so hopefully they're not going to be out for an overly long period of time with their respective injuries. Guillaume Brisebois is out indefinitely for the Vancouver Canucks after having surgery for a lower body injury, so sort of like a couple of these other guys we mentioned. Brisebois was a fringe NHL player, most likely a guy who was going to be sent to the AHL and be a call-up option. It's not a bad blow for the Canucks, but it does give them another call-up option out right now. Nate Danielson, who was having a pretty solid training camp, is out indefinitely due to an undisclosed injury, so that's probably going to put a dent in any sort of chance he had of making the team out of training camp, so it's a bad blow there for Danielson. Hopefully he's not going to be out for an overly long period of time, but a bad injury blow there for the Red Wings. Dylan Samberg is out 6 to 8 weeks for the Winnipeg Jets with a broken wrist, so that's another bad blow there for the Winnipeg Jets. Samberg was definitely going to be a top 4 defenseman to start the season for the Winnipeg Jets, so it's going to be a bad blow there for the Jets. Hopefully he's not going to take an overly long time getting back, but he's going to be out until at least November or December, so bad stuff there for Samberg and the Jets. Next, going over to Mattias Samuelsson. He may miss the start of the season for the Buffalo Sabres with upper body injury. That's bad news there. Samuelsson over the past couple of years has been a horribly injured player in the Buffalo Sabres organization, so hopefully he won't be out for an overly long period of time, but that is going to be a bad injury blow for the Sabres. And Alex Ovechkin has been cleared to contact, and he should be able to get into a preseason game in the very near future, so it doesn't seem like Ovechkin's injury is going to be overly long term, and it seems like he should be able to get back into game action in the very near future, so very interesting note there. But lots of very interesting injury updates involving Ovechkin, Samuelsson, Samberg, Danielson, Brisebois, Klingberg, Girard, Noesen, Harkins, Peterka, Mata, Kaprizov, Domi, Kakko, and McLaughlin, so very interesting note there. Next, going over to some training camp cuts. So as we've done over the past couple of days, I'm basically going to be listing the number of players that were cuts from each team in their training camps, and I'm just going to be saying the more prominent names that were cut. So in the Anaheim Ducks organization, they cut 16 players over the last 30 days, including moving Warren, Sidorov, Pastujov, Mijatovic, Gaucher, Kling, and Biakabuka to the AHL. Boston's cut 10 players, including moving Johansson and Warner to the AHL. Buffalo has cut 26 players, including moving Wahlberg, Rosen, Novikov, Levi, Leonin, Hellenius, and Beliveau to the AHL. Carolina's cut 2 players, including moving Miftakov to the AHL. Chicago cut 19 players, including moving Ledwinski, Kuzmin, Mishak, Comesso, Lardis, and Savoy to the AHL. The Avalanche have cut 15 players, including moving Ivan, Berens, Bradley, Makar, and Megna to the AHL. The Jackets cut 23 players over the last 3 days, including Delbel Beluz, Malatesta, Pinelli, Sulmans, and Holm to the AHL. The Dallas Stars cut 25 players, including Bertucci, Hemming, Kairu, and Semenov to the AHL. Edmonton cut 5 players, including moving Morella to the AHL. Florida cut 4 players. LA cut 3 players, including moving Jack Hughes to the AHL. Minnesota cut 21 players, including moving Bankier, Kumpelainen, Lambos, Height, and Peart to the AHL. Montreal cut 30 players over the last 3 days, including Fowler, Kidney, Misar, Roy, and Tuck to the AHL, and Rohier to the National League. Nashville cut 19 players, including moving Corona, Edstrom, Gibson, Lind, and Weisblatt to the AHL. Jersey cut 16 players, including moving Brennan and Henzel to the AHL. The Islanders cut 5 players, including moving Lennox and Pulkkinen to the AHL. Rangers cut 7, including moving Dorrington and Sikora to the AHL. Philadelphia cut 2, including moving recent first-round pick Nesbitt to the OHL. Pittsburgh cut 20, including moving Painaniemi and Chris Coolio to the AHL. San Jose cut 4 players, including moving Bison and Chernyshov to the AHL and Wang to the OHL. Seattle cut 21 players, including moving Shale, Goyet, Dragic, Kovacevic, Furcus, Kakko, Morrison, Nelson, Price, and Rakoff to the AHL. St. Louis cut 20 players, including moving Juracek to the OHL, Carbonneau to the QMJHL, and Cranley, Bushinger, Stanko, Pekarsik, and Pekka to the AHL. Tampa cut 22 players, including moving Gaucher, Gil, Groshev to the AHL. Toronto cut 34 players, including moving Chadwick, Kressler, Quillian, and Weber to the AHL. Vancouver cut 17 players, including moving Young, Stillman, Kudraistev, and Klimovic to the AHL. Vegas cut 25 players, including cutting Sedona, Sapovaliev, Hallam, Kataford, Demick, and Brabenak to the AHL, and Winnipeg cut 7 players, including moving Zhilkin and Wagner to the AHL. So that's a long list of a lot of guys being cut and being sent to the AHL. So very interesting note there. There were a couple of surprises there, but most of those guys were already going to be sent to the AHL anyway, but that has drastically cut a lot of teams' training camp rosters. Next, going over to waivers. We have a long list of waivers here. So when we talked last, Ivan Fedotov, Liam Foudy, Julian Gauthier, Cole McWard, Mitchell, Connaughton, Rosen, and Smallman were on waivers. He said there was a very good chance most of them would probably all clear, and they all did, so no surprises there. Then the next day, we saw Poirier in Calgary, Mayo, McCowan, Sillinger, Sawchenko in Columbus, Berbule, Fellhaber, Tynan, Paulin in Colorado, Brown, Hablin, and Jarventy in Edmonton, Beckman in NYI, Alexandrov, McGing in St. Louis, Boyd, Giroux, Letary in Toronto, and Cormier in Vegas all be placed on waivers. I thought there was a chance that maybe a guy like Poirier in Calgary, who's a decent young defenseman, could be claimed. I thought there was a chance Berbule, who was a solid bomb 6'4", could be claimed. I thought maybe to some extent a guy like Jarventy could be claimed. Alexandrov in St. Louis. Maybe one of those older vets in Toronto like Boyd, Giroux, or Letary. And definitely I thought Cormier stood a very good chance of being claimed in Vegas. But all those guys wound up clearing, so very interesting note there. Then we saw Mishak in Anaheim, Jones and Lecisions in Buffalo. We saw Fashin, Gons, Faitia in Columbus. We saw Tornado in Chicago. We saw Tard, Capobianco, Lynn, and Strangers in Dallas. Belzile, Klurman, Condata in Montreal, as well as Delgazio and Farrell. Schmelzer in New Jersey. Luff and Schuneman in St. Louis. Fanti, Lundmark, Sabrin, and Santini in Tampa. All we placed on waivers yesterday. Lots of very interesting waiver placements. I thought there was a chance that maybe a guy like Zach Jones in Buffalo could be claimed. I thought there was another chance that Michael Faitia, who had a really solid season last year, could get claimed. I thought there was a thought maybe Strangers could get claimed in Dallas, maybe Delgazio in Montreal, or Farrell in Montreal. I thought there was also maybe a shot that Lundmark could get claimed in Tampa, but all of them also cleared. So at this current point in time, we have not had any waiver claims in the NHL. And then earlier today, we saw a handful of guys be placed on waivers, including Brindamore, Seedley in Carolina, Abukibel, Gleason, Jones, Kierstead in Minnesota, Gravel, Lucchini, Murray, Mutter, and Osterley in Nashville, Bleed, Dowling, Fix-Wolanski, Pouliot in NYR, Grans in Philadelphia, LeBate, McEachran, Patera, and Sheldon in Vancouver, and DiGiuseppe and Shaw in Winnipeg. So I think most of these guys will probably wind up clearing. Maybe Abukibel in Minnesota gets claimed, maybe Osterley in Nashville gets claimed, maybe Dowling in the Rangers organization gets claimed. I could see Grans in Philadelphia definitely get claimed. DiGiuseppe in Winnipeg or McEachran in Vancouver I could also see getting claimed, but I wouldn't be surprised if we once again tomorrow saw no players be claimed. So very interesting note there, but some very interesting waiver updates with all of those players. And next, going over to a couple of news updates. So going over to those other pieces of news. First, when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, they have recently extended a contract to stay at KeyBank Arena. So their current arena, they had I think a clause, or they restructured their contract to stay there for another 5 years. So the Buffalo Sabres don't have to worry about finding another arena or having to try and re-up their new arena for another 5 years, which is great stuff there for the Sabres. So I think that means they're going to be there until just after 2030. So very good stuff there. But the Buffalo Sabres have been able to extend the contract with their new arena. So very interesting out there. Well, the New York Rangers, according to some recent reports, I think it was Elliot Freeman who mentioned this, says that the New York Rangers tried to offer Artemi Panarin a Andrei Kopitar style contract. So the LA Kings a couple of years back, when Kopitar was entering the final year of his deal, came to Kopitar and was asking Kopitar if he would sign a 2-year deal at $7 million, which he did end up signing to sign with the LA Kings, and he did accept that. So it's maybe like a low-term, low AAV deal just to help the team keep on building. Now, at current point in time, Panarin has not signed with the New York Rangers, so that sort of leads me to believe that he doesn't want to take a lower AAV deal to stay with the Rangers. He probably wants like a top dollar deal, which in my opinion, at current point in time with Panarin where he is in his career, would be like a 3 to 4 year deal, maybe like $8 to $9 million. So it seems like Panarin at current point in time does not have any interest in taking a Kopitar-like deal from the New York Rangers. So very interesting note there. But the Rangers tried to get creative to extend Panarin, apparently, according to Elliot Friedman, and they may have offered a Kopitar-like deal, but given the fact Panarin hasn't signed yet, there's a very likely chance he doesn't want that sort of a deal. So very interesting note there. And lastly, here going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we got a couple of trade rumors here to talk about. First, with the Marc Andre Fleury situation. After finishing his preseason, after being on a PTO, playing one last preseason game and basically riding off into the sunset, Frank Seravalli says that there's a possibility Marc Andre Fleury is not done. He says that he expects teams, especially ones in need of goaltending help, which my guess would be teams like Columbus, maybe to some extent Carolina and Edmonton, could try and lure Marc Andre Fleury out of retirement. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. The way he sort of finished out that last preseason game with the Penguins, I think Fleury's pretty much done, but there would definitely be a couple of teams like I just mentioned. Edmonton could really use a starter. The Blue Jackets also could probably use a guy who could at least be a tandem goaltender with Merzlikins, and on top of that, Carolina is always looking for a goaltender. So I mean, like, there are a couple of teams out there who really need goaltending help who could try and lure Fleury out of retirement, although I don't think it's a very likely scenario. But Frank Seravalli does say that there are going to be teams later on to the season who will try and lure Marc Andre Fleury out of retirement to try and play in a couple of games, so we should wait and see on that. Also, keeping with Frank Seravalli, he was talking about the Boston Bruins, and he says that Milstead at this current point in time is not yet on the trade block. He says that the Bruins really want to try and figure out what they have in Milstead first, which makes some sense. Milstead was a trade deadline acquisition. He only played like a handful of weeks with the Boston Bruins before their season ended, so I can see where the Boston Bruins might want to sort of run with Milstead to start the season and see how he does before they make some sort of a decision on him. He is entering the final year of his deal. He's got a $5 million cap hit. If he has a solid season and looks like a Milstead that was a couple of years back in Buffalo and the start of his tenure in Colorado, then maybe the Boston Bruins sign him to like a 2 to 4 year deal and try and keep him in the Boston Bruins organization. But I mean, if he doesn't want to extend come the trade deadline and the Boston Bruins are not an overly good spot, I think they regardless would probably have to trade him. So we shall wait and see on that. But at least at this point in time, even though we've heard Milstead's name along with Pavel Zacha's name out there, we've recently talked about how Zacha, it seems that the Boston Bruins will be open to trading for the right price. It doesn't seem like the same thing applies to Casey Milstead, and it seems like they'd rather just hold on to Milstead at least for the first few months of the season, see how he does in Boston, see how he sorts of rolls in like a Milstead role, and then at a later date they can make a decision on if to try and extend him or maybe try and trade him later on. So we shall wait and see on that. But Frank Seravalli does say at current point in time he's not on the trade block yet, and to me that makes a ton of sense with the Bruins trying to figure out what they have in Milstead. Next, going over to David Pagnotta, he was mentioning the Calgary Flames and Rasmus Andersson, and he mentioned that according to his recent reports, Rasmus Andersson's preferred destination to be traded to in a trade would be the Vegas Golden Knights or the Dallas Stars, two teams who definitely have a tiny bit of a hole on the blue line and could use Andersson in an upgrade. The Vegas Golden Knights just lost Alex Pietrangelo. Well, they still have a pretty decent defense in my opinion without Pietrangelo. They will probably definitely be targeting a defenseman come this year's trade deadline. If they can get their hands on Andersson and have Calgary retain some money, like, why would they not do that? And they also have Andersson's old D partner in Noah Hannafin. They could get Andersson and you can have a top four of McNabb, Theodore, Hannafin, Andersson, and if they don't have to trade him in a trade and have guys like Whitecloud and Korzak on the third pair, like, that would be a stellar top end of the blue line. So we'll have to wait and see on that, but there's still a lot of speculation that Andersson to Vegas is a possibility. The other team that David Pagnotta mentions as a frontrunner is Dallas. He says that Andersson also has potentially some interest in going in Dallas. That makes sense. The Stars could definitely use a top four right shot defenseman. They don't have a whole bunch of them. They have a lot of left-handed defensemen, but not a whole bunch of guys who can play on the right side. And personally, I don't think Leah Bushkin's a top four right shot defenseman. So, I mean, I think the Dallas Stars would also have some major interest in trying to go after Rasmus Andersson. And apparently, according to David Pagnotta, Andersson indeed nixed a trade to Los Angeles earlier. So we heard a couple of rumblings. I think it was around the start of free agency that Andersson nixed a trade to the Los Angeles Kings, and Pagnotta seems to be confirming it. So very interesting note there. But according to Pagnotta, Andersson would like to go to Vegas and Dallas in a trade if he was to get dealt, and he did nix a trade to Los Angeles earlier in the offseason. So very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to Pierre LeBrun, he mentioned in a recent article, I think it was, that Anders Lee could be a top trade target for the New York Islanders. Now Lee, I think, does have trade protection. He's entering the final year of his deal. He's got a $7 million cap hit. He is the New York Islanders captain. We talked about a little while ago how it seemed like Matthew Darsh was going to wait a little bit to sign Anders Lee to an extension, just to see how the New York Islanders season goes and how their forward group unfolds in the first few weeks and first few months of the season. But I do agree with Pierre LeBrun saying that Lee is a prime trade candidate for the Islanders. Like, I know that they could potentially try and extend him and that Lee really likes in New York, but I think if they have a shot and they're out of a playoff spot and they can move Lee for a really solid return, I think that'll make some sense. Lee is a former 30-goal scorer. He could be a really solid addition for a whole bunch of playoff-bound teams. If the Islanders retain half of his cap hit, that would bump his cap hit down to $3.5 million. $3.5 million for a second or third line winger who can score goals would not be a half bad addition for a whole bunch of teams. So once again, I don't think it's a guarantee that to happen anytime in the near future, but I think if the Islanders are out of a playoff spot come the trade deadline, Lee would be a very likely trade candidate for the New York Islanders. And that's sort of what Pierre LeBrun is saying in this article about how Lee could be a very likely trade candidate for the New York Islanders. So very interesting note there. But that's all we'll talk for today. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you think Marc Andre Fleury comes out of retirement? Do you think the Bruins eventually trade Casey Middlestad? Could Andersson go to Vegas or Dallas? And do you think Lee will eventually get traded by the New York Islanders? Definitely your thoughts on all of that, plus the other two updates we talked about, and then the signing, injury, training camp cuts, and waiver updates. Definitely your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Until today's video, and if you're related, subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers. Don't forget to stay tuned for videos coming out in the very near future. Also, the blog doing news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So check that out. I'll link to that in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.